The sun was high over Ravenhill as Noah and I stepped out of the rental car. The heat pressed down like a memory you can't shake. It had been 5 years since I'd last set foot here. The old Bennett estate looked mostly the same. White columns, faded shutters, the wraparound porch sagging just slightly. But something about it felt heavier. My mother and sister stood near the side gate, greeting distant cousins with tight smiles and too many hugs. We weren't supposed to be here, not really. For years the message had been clear. Stay away. Now's not a good time, Mom would say, or Grandpa's not well. But then came the invitation, Arthur Bennett's 90th birthday. If you want to see him, Mom had said, come now. And just like that, I booked flights from Portland. I hadn't seen my grandfather in person since I left for college. He was the one who quietly sent checks when my parents couldn't. The one who taught me to plane wood in the backyard shop when I was barely tall enough to hold a tool. We used to spend hours together. I remembered the scent of cedar and peppermint tea that always lingered around him. Noah and I walked into the backyard. Folding chairs, paper lanterns, cheap wine in plastic flutes, polite music from someone's Bluetooth speaker. It was all carefully staged, but not quite sincere. I scanned the crowd. Half of them I didn't know. The other half barely glanced my way. I felt like a guest at a stranger's wedding. There were a few awkward conversations with old neighbors, some co-workers of my father's, and distant cousins I hadn't seen since middle school. Everyone acted friendly enough, but their smiles didn't touch their eyes. My sister Rachel hovered around her husband Drew, laughing a little too loudly at his jokes. My mom floated from table to table, clearly performing, basking in attention. Eventually, the music dimmed. People turned toward the back of the yard. My stomach twisted. The double doors of the house creaked open, and 2 men wheeled out an old man in a beige cardigan. Everyone clapped like he was royalty, but the moment I saw him, I froze. The man in the wheelchair looked staged. His posture too straight, his skin too smooth. His eyes were open, but distant, blank. I waited for a smile, a wink, a wave, but there was nothing, just that eerie stillness. My mom leaned over. "He doesn't talk much anymore," she whispered. "It's hard for him." I nodded numbly, but something inside me twisted tighter. That wasn't the man I remembered. Arthur Bennett had spark. He used to grin with a sideways smile that made you feel like you were in on a joke. His eyes had life in them, even in the darkest times. This man looked like he'd been manufactured. Noah shifted beside me. "What's wrong?" I asked under my breath. He didn't respond. "Noah?" He was staring at the man in the wheelchair. "Get your bag," he said quietly. "We're leaving." I blinked. "What?" "Act normal," he said. "Smile, walk. But we're leaving." I forced a smile as he turned to face me. His expression didn't match his tone. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even scared. He was sure. "Noah, what are you talking about?" He looked back at the man again. "That's not your grandfather." The words knocked the air from my lungs. I tried to laugh, but couldn't. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not. His ears, his chin, the way he moves, or doesn't. It's not him." I glanced at the man again, and for the first time, really looked. His ears were smaller, rounder. Grandpa's had always stuck out slightly. His nose looked a little too thin, and he hadn't reacted at all to the attention, not even when Rachel leaned down and kissed his cheek. My heart started racing. "I need to go inside," I whispered. Noah nodded. "I'll come with you. Just act normal." We walked into the house through the side door. Inside, the hallway was crowded with framed family photos. I paused at one, a picture of Grandpa and me at my high school graduation, his arm around my shoulders, his smile, proud and bright. I looked back toward the yard through the window. The man outside was not the same. Noah reached for my hand. "We need to leave now." I didn't argue. We moved quickly but calmly up the stairs, packed our overnight bags, and walked back out the front door. No one noticed. The music played on. Laughter drifted from the backyard. When we got to the car, Noah opened my door like always, but once we were inside, he locked the doors and gripped the wheel. "Okay," I said. "Tell me everything." He didn't look at me. I remember faces. I always have. I can sketch a person I saw 10 years ago from memory. That man out there, his face isn't just wrong, it's someone else's. Someone else? He nodded. A relative, maybe, I don't know, but they're pretending. I sat back in my seat, stunned. Could this really be happening? I hadn't spoken to Grandpa in 3 years. Every time I tried, I was told he was too tired, too sick, or asleep. My last real conversation with him had been over Zoom. He looked thin, but he was lucid. He made a joke about squirrels stealing his tomatoes. That was the man I remembered. Noah watched me closely. "You see it now, don't you?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I do." "Then we need to do something." "I'm calling the police." He didn't argue. I pulled out my phone and dialed. My hands shook as I explained the situation. "I know how this sounds," I told the dispatcher, "but something is very wrong at that house." The officer was calm. "We'll send someone to check. Stay where you are." So we did. And that's when everything started to unravel. We sat in the car like fugitives. I kept watching the house through the rearview mirror, half expecting someone to come running after us. But the party rolled on. Laughter, music, clinking plastic glasses. From a distance, it looked normal, harmless. But every instinct in my body told me that the reality was anything but. 20 minutes after the call, 2 plainclothes officers arrived. 1 male, 1 female. They parked a little further up the street and walked toward the estate with the kind of quiet efficiency you only notice when you're watching for it. Noah and I stayed inside the car. The officers spoke with my mother first. She smiled brightly at them, gestured, nodded, then frowned. Her body language shifted as the conversation grew tense. I could see it all in her arms, rigid, crossed, defensive. She pointed once toward the man in the wheelchair. The second officer knelt beside him, said something. He didn't respond. She nodded slowly, then rose to her feet. One by one they began pulling people aside. My stomach churned. I wanted to call Grandpa's name, to run in there, shake someone, demand to know where he was. But I stayed put. After what felt like hours, but was probably 15 minutes, the male officer walked toward us. I rolled the window down. "Miss Bennett?" "Yes." "I'm Officer Delaney. Can we talk?" "Of course." We stepped out of the car. I explained what I knew about the years of dodged calls, the Zoom chat, the sudden invite, the stranger in the wheelchair. Officer Delaney listened, taking notes but not interrupting. When I finished, he nodded. "We're treating this as a wellness check for now. Your concerns are valid. The individual at the center of this, the man presented as your grandfather, has no official ID on him. Your mother provided documents, but we'll need to verify." I felt like I was going to throw up. "Is it him?" Delaney hesitated. "We don't believe so." The world tilted. He handed me a card. "Stay in town. We may need to speak further." I nodded, numb, frozen. That night, we checked into a cheap motel at the edge of Ravenhill. I didn't sleep. I couldn't stop playing the party over in my head. The man's blank stare, Rachel's forced laughter, my mother's brittle smile. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "How could you?" my mother snapped. No hello, no pretense. "You called the police on your own family. Where is Grandpa?" "You don't get to ask that. What did you do?" A pause. "You weren't here. You don't understand." I nearly dropped the phone. "He's dead, isn't he?" Silence, then a click. The next morning, 2 officers knocked on our motel door. Their faces were somber. "Miss Bennett," the woman said. "We've confirmed through statements and property records. Arthur Bennett passed away in March 2020. I sat down on the bed. They buried him privately. No death certificate was filed, no obituary, no notice. So what was yesterday? A deception, the male officer said. And possibly a felony. We're opening an investigation. Noah squeezed my hand. 3 years. He'd been dead 3 years, and I had been sending him cards, emails, asking to talk. They had lied to me, all of them. But why? We stayed in Ravenhill. The investigation didn't slow down. It accelerated. I met with detectives, lawyers, even a forensic document expert. Every time I sat down to speak, I wanted to scream. My family hadn't just lied. They had staged a performance, a macabre charade, all to keep a secret buried. Arthur Bennett's death certificate was filed 3 days after my visit. That's what finally raised a red flag at the county office. The cornerback dating didn't help. Neither did the absence of funeral records or a grave. I kept thinking, why hide a death? Why pretend he was alive? What were they gaining? Then I got a call from my grandfather's lawyer, someone named Wallace Dunham. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice gravelly but firm, "I've been trying to reach you for quite some time." I didn't reply. My throat was dry. "Your grandfather left his estate to you, everything, the house, his assets, the trust, all of it." "What?" "This was no secret," he added gently. "He told your mother and sister over 3 years ago." The room spun. So that was it. The motive. They didn't tell me he was dead, because the moment they did, his estate would pass to me, and they weren't ready to let go of that. So they faked it, kept me away, lied to my face. I felt sick. "Why didn't you contact me?" I asked. "I tried," he said, "several times, but your mother responded, said you were overseas, unreachable. Then my letters came back." "They blocked me," I said, voice cracking. "They took everything." But they hadn't taken enough. Within days, legal action began. My family, the people who had raised me, were charged with multiple counts: fraud, concealment of death, identity deception, theft of estate property. It made the local papers. Then it went national. I read the comments under the online articles. Some people called them monsters. Others said they were desperate. A few even blamed me, the girl who ruined her family's illusion. But I didn't care. I wanted the truth, and I got it. When the court formally transferred the estate to me, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. This wasn't justice. It was cleanup. My mother refused to speak to me. Rachel sent a single text. "You've always been the favorite. Now you just proved it." I didn't reply. Noah and I visited the house 1 week later. Everyone was gone. No furniture, no photos, no trace of them. The only thing left behind was a note in the kitchen, written in my mother's sharp handwriting. "You always were good at taking what you didn't earn." I burned it in the sink. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in Grandpa's old chair, and for the first time in years, felt at home. The first night I spent alone in the Bennett estate felt like walking through a museum of memories I wasn't allowed to touch. The house was quiet, eerily so. Even the creaks of the floorboards seemed to have forgotten how to echo. It smelled faintly of lemon oil and dust, like someone had done a lazy job pretending to care. I moved from room to room slowly, each step revealing ghosts I didn't realize I'd buried. In the dining room, I found a box of photos tucked into the built-in cabinet. Some were decades old. Grandpa as a young man beside a classic car, my mother in a pageant sash, Rachel on a swing, me grinning and gap-toothed, covered in glitter paint from one of those summer art camps Grandpa used to insist I go to. I sat on the floor and flipped through them all, one by one, until I hit the bottom, and found a photo I'd never seen before. It was Grandpa holding me as a baby, but it wasn't the pose that caught me. It was his face, joy, clear and full, unfiltered by the wear of age or responsibility. A look I hadn't realized I missed. That night, I slept in the guest room, the one with the blue wallpaper, and cried quietly into the pillow. The next morning, I found mail on the porch, a stack of sympathy cards, half-hearted and late, addressed to Arthur Bennett. Some were clearly from people who hadn't heard the truth. Others were oddly formal. But one envelope stood out. No return address. Thick parchment, sealed in red wax. Inside was a letter. To Victoria Bennett. I hope this reaches you before the others. Your grandfather trusted me with certain truths. Truths I think you deserve to know. Come to the Willow Creek Storage Facility, Unit 94. Use the attached key. Burn this letter. It wasn't signed, just folded with a brass key clipped to the corner. Noah raised an eyebrow when I told him. This is how horror movies start, he said. Then let's bring flashlights. We drove out that afternoon. The facility was old but functional, tucked between an empty strip mall and an abandoned gas station. The clerk didn't even glance up when we passed. Unit 94 was in the back, surrounded by rusted fencing and weeds. The lock clicked open easily. Inside, shelves of boxes, filing cabinets, and one wooden crate labeled Bennett & Comby, 1982-2005. I opened the top box first. Bank records, letters, handwritten memos from Grandpa to someone named J.T. Ledger, statements showing consistent payments, not to my mother, not to Rachel, but to me. Hope this helps. Proud of you. Dozens of them. He hadn't just helped me during college. He'd been supporting me well into my late 20s, quietly, unconditionally, even as my own parents pretended he'd forgotten I existed. Another folder held photos, ones I'd never seen. Me performing in a high school play, graduation, candid shots of me and Noah during a visit to Portland, ones we didn't take. He was keeping track, I whispered. Noah nodded. They told you he didn't care, but he never stopped watching. Behind the boxes was a small fireproof safe. It opened with the same brass key. Inside, a single envelope addressed in shaky handwriting. Victoria. If you're reading this, it means they couldn't hide it forever. I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you myself, but I was tired. So tired. I left everything to you, not out of favoritism, but because you were the only one who never asked for it. You earned this. Live well, and forgive what you can. Arthur. I sat there for a long time, letter in hand, surrounded by the quiet evidence of a man who had spent his final years watching from the sidelines, while others tried to erase his love for me. They hadn't just stolen from me. They'd stolen from him too. The days that followed were a blur of legal documents, phone calls, and questions I wasn't sure I wanted the answers to. My mother and Rachel refused all communication. They had moved out of the Bennett house without a word, leaving behind only that bitter note on the kitchen counter. But their silence didn't stop the investigation. Noah and I returned to the Willow Creek storage unit more than once. Every visit unearthed something else, proof of my grandfather's ongoing connection to me, his plans, his concerns. He had been documenting everything. There were photocopies of emails he'd sent to my mother about me, asking why I hadn't been invited home for Christmas, why they weren't returning my calls. Their responses were cold, dismissive. She chose distance, one email read. We're respecting it. But he hadn't believed it, and neither did I anymore. At the local courthouse, I met again with Wallace Dunham. He brought documents showing that my grandfather had tried multiple times to involve me more directly in the family business. Bennett & Comby had been a mid-sized regional lumber company. Nothing flashy, but profitable. Arthur had planned to hand it over to me gradually. My mother had shut it down quietly after his death, sold off assets, absorbed what she could. "They kept you out because you weren't useful to them," Wallace said bluntly. "You couldn't be controlled. So they erased you." I felt sick. We walked the grounds of the old lumber mill that afternoon, the one that now sat quiet, surrounded by padlocked fencing and for sale signs. I didn't know if I wanted to reopen it, but standing there, the smell of sawdust still faint in the wind, I realized something. This was mine now, all of it. Not out of revenge, but because I was the only one who hadn't stolen. Later that week, the detective assigned to the case called. They had interviewed the man in the wheelchair. My uncle, David. He had agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. "He said your mother made the decision," the detective told me. "He just played along." Of course he did. Noah and I sat outside the house that evening, watching the sun set over the old oak trees Grandpa had planted himself. I held the letter again, the one he left me. It was stained now, soft at the edges. I'd read it 100 times. "You earned this." The words burned into me, not out of ego, but because for so long I thought I didn't matter. A letter arrived in the mail the next morning. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Me and Grandpa sitting on the dock behind the house, fishing rods in hand, laughing. On the back, in faded blue ink, "They can't erase everything." I cried for the first time since the estate transfer. That evening, I walked into the master bedroom, the one no one had touched in years. It smelled of cedar and old cologne. I opened the top drawer of his nightstand and found a small velvet box. Inside, his wedding ring and a note. "For when you're ready to stop running." I wore it on a chain that day, not because it was mine, but because it was his. Noah hugged me tighter than usual that night. "I think he'd be proud of you," he said. I believed him. Weeks passed. The sharp edges of grief softened into something quieter. Not peace exactly, but understanding. The investigation wound down. My family had vanished into the grey spaces of legal consequence and personal exile. I stopped checking the news, stopped asking questions I already knew the answers to. Instead, I focused on the house. The Bennett estate had been many things over the years. A home, a fortress, a stage for deception. But under the dust and shadows, it still had bones worth saving. I started small, repaired broken steps, refinished the porch swing, replaced the tattered curtains in the sunroom with soft linen ones that breathed in the morning air. It wasn't renovation, it was resurrection. Each room I cleaned felt like reclaiming part of myself. Noah helped with everything. He never asked if I wanted to sell, never implied we should leave. He understood. This wasn't just a house. It was memory. It was legacy. It was the last place my grandfather had truly lived. I turned his study into a library again, kept the old desk, the one with initials carved faintly into the side, cleaned out the drawers, but left the pencil marks on the surface untouched. Some things should remain. One morning, I found a letter hidden in the false bottom of the desk. Another note from Arthur. Short, blunt. Victoria, when all this ends, build something better, not from guilt, not for them, for you. A. I framed it. Fall came quickly. The trees around the estate exploded into color. I began hosting Sunday dinners. Nothing fancy, just friends, locals, neighbors who'd once whispered and now smiled. At first I expected judgment. Instead, I found curiosity, even kindness. They always made it sound like you left, one woman said over coffee. But it was them, wasn't it? I nodded. It was. There were still hard days. I'd hear a floorboard creak and expect to see my mother's silhouette. I'd find old receipts in drawers, silent reminders of the years they spent pretending I didn't matter. But those moments faded. Bit by bit, they stopped haunting me. On the 1-year anniversary of my grandfather's death, the real one, I stood by the pond behind the house. The dock had been rebuilt. Same dimensions, same peeling paint, because I'd insisted. I sat with Noah beside me and read his letter aloud. You earned this. Live well. Forgive what you can. I didn't forgive everything, but I forgave enough. The wind shifted. The oak trees whispered like they always had. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the house was listening. It remembered, and so did I.